John Harbaugh revealed a very interesting plan and potential role for Derrick Henry as the season goes on. Lamar Jackson misses practice. We have lots to talk about here on today's episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day and just a part of your day in general. Free and available for you as always, all podcasting platforms. Video form, you can hit that like and subscribe button over on YouTube. Audio form, you can follow along with us over there by hitting that follow and subscribe button. We bring you 5 days a week of daily Ravens content. Plus, we go live after every single game, after piece of big news, and we also have bonus content as well. It is Taco Tuesday, and here with me today is former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail. And Q, tough start to the season for the Ravens in the record column, 0-1. They lose 27-20 to the Chiefs, but I liked their fight. I liked a lot of what we saw out of Lamar Jackson. How'd you feel about the game overall?
Well, the overall experience was the fact that we saw two juggernaut teams that looked the part and played the part and had 28 million eyes locked down upon them. The outcome of the game, because this is such a competitive league and wins and losses, they all stack up one way or the other. Unfortunately, I'm not feeling all that good about it. But the glass half full, recognizing that it is a marathon and not a sprint. It is a week-to-week league. There's a lot there that the Ravens can grow upon. And, okay, let's go ahead and start the growth process.
Yeah, there is a lot they can learn from. And, again, we know, Q, the Ravens don't dress their starters in the preseason, or at least they haven't. So kind of a tune-up game of sorts, but obviously this game counts. And you got to be under P's and Q's. And in some areas, they were not. In other areas, they were. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But want to get to the big news of yesterday first, because John Harbaugh spoke to the media. And we'll start with what he had to say about Derrick Henry and the run game. Because obviously Henry had 5 carries on that first drive, looked really good, scored the opening touchdown of the season. Not just for the Ravens, but for the entire NFL. It was the opening game of the season. But after that 5-carry first drive, yeah, exactly. After that 5-carry first drive, it was 3 carries for the rest of the half, and then he finished the game with 13. So after the 5-carry first drive, 8 for the entire rest of the game. Now, game flow kind of dictated that a little bit, as you know, the game kind of not got away from them, but it started to be that way. And so Justice Hill came in certain situations, and there was a lot of other stuff that happened. So we didn't necessarily see as much Derrick Henry as me personally, Q, I would have thought we would have seen in that first game. But John Harbaugh was asked about the state of the run game, the state of the offense, and he ended up saying that, look, they didn't bring Derrick Henry in to run the ball 30 times a game. Harbaugh said that he's done that, but it's about everybody. It's about Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews. You went on and on and on about that. Definitely some mixed responses to that quote in general. I think the biggest one from people was, well, why would you pay him all that money if you don't expect him to come in and run all these plays with them? And I think, look, 30 carries is probably excessive. You don't want to run Derrick Henry that much, right? But I think if you bring him in, you want to use him effectively. How did you take John Harbaugh's quote about it?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. We have a social media sports fan base that loves to just take one thing and run with it. And I think this is one of those times. I think Derrick Henry is going to have a game where it is a 27-28 type of a game because he is dominating so much, and the Ravens, are up so much that it dictates for them to go ahead and run Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry is getting into a rhythm. It is different than when he was in Tennessee, when it was the Derrick Henry show and they committed to running the ball with him. I think the Ravens do need to commit to running the ball with him, yes. I don't see it going to be quite as Tennessee-like. Okay. But I also recognize that when teams like what we saw with the Chiefs are quick strike teams, it changes up the feeling in the mind of Todd Monken, and it makes him feel like we got to go ahead and do something quick strike. And if it is Lamar Jackson running the ball, then we're going to go ahead and do that. And I think that's where the rub comes in this year. We're going to see how it all kind of unfolds for Lamar Jackson and company.
Yeah, and I think it's a big part of you don't want to just run Derrick Henry into the ground, because that's what Tennessee did for the majority of Derrick Henry's years there. But you do bring him in to hopefully be a big part of your offense. I don't think you bring a Derrick Henry in to be a platoon player with Justice Hill, right? I think that Justice Hill showed a lot on Thursday. I was really, really impressed with what he had to offer, especially those final few plays where he was somehow tasked with blocking Chris Jones. I mean, man, that was something else. But for a guy like Derrick Henry, and especially you pay him, we talked about the running back market, Q, and kind of what it is today, right? $16 million over 2 years for a running back is one of the larger average annual values you can give out at this stage for running backs. If you're going to use him more as a platoon player, well, I would have just brought back Gus Edwards, or I would have just brought back J.K. Dobbins, where I think Henry does, you want him up in that 17 to 20 range, I think, pretty consistently, but 30 is a little much, right? I think Harbaugh's saying 30 carries. Yes, you're not bringing him in to run him into the ground with 30 carries, but you also don't want to, I guess, underutilize him. And I think that's where people are kind of taking this quote as, okay, he's going to be in a split with Justice Hill, because we kind of saw that about how you mentioned the game and the feeling and the game flow kind of happened against Kansas City on Thursday night.
So again, what you are bringing into the equation is the presence of Derrick Henry, what other teams can or cannot do. Again, this is an upper tier team that you're more than likely going to see in the playoffs. You yourself, you're not quite as veteran chemistry, I should say, rather than the word veteran. You don't have quite the chemistry with one another, like said Kansas City Chiefs. Where's Andy Reid? Where's Patrick Mahomes? Where's Pacheco? Obviously you got Kelsey. There are some pieces there that they already have that is allowing them the opportunity to be aggressive when they need to be aggressive, running the ball, and then chilling out, slinging it, and doing some isolation things. It's going to get that way. I promise you. This is the AFC North. This isn't a finesse division. This is a power football division, and we're going to see that unfold itself. I think, the circumstances at hand kind of dictated the flow of the game. But you're also talking about Derrick Henry on a 4th and 2 when your tackle is pulling one way and you got a free runner coming right at Derrick Henry. And all of a sudden, whoop, whoop, Derrick Henry makes the guy miss, and you wind up picking up the first down. And it's called talent. So talent-wise, I'm glad we got Derrick Henry. And it's going to be a scenario where he's going to close out games. He's going to be a gamer. And those moments, we're going to look back on this moment and be like, oh, now I get what John Harbaugh is saying.
Yeah, and I think
it'll be criminal if we look back on this moment and we don't see Derrick Henry being a featured back at points in the season, that a guy that is on a trajectory towards 1,000+ yards rushing. It'll be criminal if we do not see him getting into the end zone minimum 9 times this season. Minimum.
Yep. You got to use him the right way. I think that at the end of the day, using him 30 times a game is probably not the way you want to go about it, but using him enough, more than what they did against Kansas City, with hopefully game flow being able to dictate that. I would have liked to see them maybe establish it a little earlier in the game, especially after they had run those 5 carries with him. But obviously by the time that we were saying, okay, where is it? Game flow had already gotten too far away from it. And we're just kind of sitting there like, well, I guess they have to kind of pivot now. And that's what they ended up having to do. But Q, let's talk about Lamar Jackson for a second. Lamar missed practice on Monday. He was at picture day. Picture day happened. He was on the field. He was messing around with the DBs, and he was there for that. But at practice, was not there. Was not on the field. John Harbaugh was asked about it, said that some players missed time due to personal reasons, due to physical reasons, but ultimately said, hey, the injury report comes out Wednesday afternoon. So I guess we'll be waiting a couple more days to see if anything is up with Lamar, if it's just as a personal thing. Lamar ended up taking some hits, and he got a little physical in that game. He was lowering his shoulder into guys and kind of establishing some level of physicality himself. I mean, based off of everything, I mean, he seemed fine after the game. Everything was kind of, nothing really alarming. Do you think this is maybe just soreness, general rest day, or do you think maybe there is something more?
Yeah, no, there's an extra rest day that they are going to have. Obviously, technically extra when it comes down to it, work days that are now flipped into rest days. So, yes, Monday normally would be hardly anything. Tuesday is clearly off. You get your Wednesday, Thursday, Friday week. Use it as an extra day. If Lamar is being Lamar and there's nothing major and it's just I want it to be a rest day to overcome some of the issues, whatever those issues are for him from the game, okay, I know those 3 days that he's going to be working. He better put in some good work. I'm sure he will be, and everything will be good.
Yeah, and that's the big thing where, again, if Lamar needs a rest day, he needs a rest day. We're not going to necessarily know until Wednesday, like John Harbaugh said, but I would assume, again, I don't know anything. I'm not a doctor. I would just say I assume that it probably is some level of a rest day, but we'll have to wait till Wednesday to see what it is. Coming up, though, in the second part of the show, going to be diving a bit more into the Kansas City game and also what to expect moving forward from this team, including offensive line conversation from multiple different angles. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Hims. When we leave the house, it's phone, wallet, keys. How's my hair look? But if you're experiencing hair loss, you may not be so confident when you step outside your door. It's time to get that confidence back and restore your hair with Hims. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work all from the comfort of your couch. Plus, the process is simple and 100% online. Just answer a few questions and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to your door. Start a free trial online today at hims.com/LockedOnNFL. That's HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/LockedOnNFL. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. We're back, our second segment, Locked On Ravens here. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail talking Ravens football on this Taco Tuesday. Really appreciate everybody again for being here today. Like and subscribe in video form. Follow along in audio form. We'd love to add you into the Locked On Ravens community if you're new, and if you're an everydayer, thank you for your consistent support here on the show. Now, Q, offensive line was a big topic of the conversation in this game. We saw, especially early, some not so great moments from this offensive line. The younger players, Daniel Falele, Roger Rosengarten, going up against Chris Jones. I didn't think the run blocking was particularly impressive for Derrick Henry in most facets of the game. What was your overall view on this line? Because I thought Tyler Linderbaum looked great, and I also thought Ronnie Stanley looked healthy, and I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, Ronnie Stanley absolutely looked healthy, and I applaud him for just putting in the work in the offseason. Clearly it showed up in the game. Very frustrated and confused as to, John Harbaugh even mentioned in his presser where there's actually metrics on the pads as far as line and where you're lined up and, all those things. And I'm like, hey, okay, league, you better have gotten it right. And if you didn't, then somebody needs to be held accountable from an aspect of refereeing and the line judge, the head lines judge, because that was criminal the way they were throwing that, illegal formation penalty, the amount of times that they threw it, and what, Ronnie was saying, hey, this is what we did in our offseason prep. I mean, I was at every training camp practice, and I saw Clete Blakeman. He was there, and he had his NFL reps there. Other days, they're more collegiate referees, but when the NFL crew is in, and if they're talking about it and they're talking about it at depth, and you got metrics to talk about what you see on the line and all that, and then you got a crew that is flag happy, that's alarming to me. That aside, as you look at the rest of the line, whether it be Voorhees, who had some critical errors, who also look at Faalele, he looked good at times, but then other times like, bro, what are you doing? And then, Roger Rosengard, Chris Jones, he got thrown to the fire. I think there's little details as far as his ability to pass set, kind of get back and then, allow for a double team action that didn't occur. There was a pull action on a 4th and 2. And I'm like, huh? And I think all of it, as far as the communication flow, especially towards the end of the game, when guys should be, as we call it, slide protection, and he should be slide to 95. And when he's over on the right and you're sliding to the left, that's an issue. So I don't know if that's just strictly on the young guys. I don't know if that is communication between Lamar, who, what, where, when, but it definitely needs to be cleaned up. It's some week one type of thing that overall, if it doesn't get cleaned up, it's a problem. If it gets cleaned up, okay, cool. There's hope. And I think that there is going to be opportunity for this ball club to get better at the O-line position.
John Harbaugh expressed confidence in the offensive line, Q, and there have been a lot of people, and I am kind of in this category as well, where I personally think Ben Cleveland's floor is more impactful for this team than Daniel Faalele's ceiling, because I think for a veteran team and a team that's trying to win, Faalele's raw at the guard position. He hasn't really played a ton of it. I think that putting Ben Cleveland in might be the best path for them, but I want to throw that question to you. Do you think the Ravens right now are better with Daniel Faalele or Ben Cleveland at the guard position?
I like the one play towards the end of the game where Daniel Faalele takes the defender, and it might have been Chris Jones too, with one hand the entire time, and controlled him and moved him and just pushed him with one hand. If Ben Cleveland is a better run blocker, then okay, let's use Ben Cleveland and possibly do a rotation like we saw McCary and Rosengard do. Or is it going to be Rosengard catches up to speed, and then all of a sudden you have McCary be able to flip and then get in and out, and then that part of getting in and out is moving him inside to guard?
I think to me too, and I think that exact play you're referencing, because the broadcast made a point of it where Chris Jones was coming in late to the snap or to the huddle to pick his offensive line matchup so we could line up against who he wanted, and he picked Faalele. And on that play, Faalele put him on the ground. He dominated him. Put him on the ground. Yep, put him on the ground. So those are the reps. You're like, oh, here's this ceiling. Like, here's what Daniel Faalele can be. Now, obviously, week one, new offensive line. Linderbaugh missed most of training camp. I expected there to be a lot of sore spots and a lot of learning to do. So it didn't necessarily shock me. I wouldn't expect the Ravens to make a change for a couple of weeks. I think that they're going to roll with this group and what they have and kind of what they're doing. But we're going to have to see the growth, hopefully, for Daniel Faalele enough to keep him in there, because I think maybe by the time the first month of the season is up, they will reevaluate and we will kind of see what that looks like. Because I thought that, hey, you know what? The end of that game, Q, that last drive, the offensive line was great. That last drive, obviously, we'll talk about it a little more in the final part of the show. But I thought that was a very good offensive 2-minute drill drive to get down the field and at least give your team a chance to tie or win the game. Now, you mentioned the illegal formation penalties. Some stats that I pulled, and we're recording this before the Monday night game, so I haven't obviously included those two teams in this. But the Ravens had those 5 penalties They had a couple of them dismissed. The Chiefs declined them, but they had 5 total called against them. The rest of the league had 15. All the other 29 teams that played Friday and Sunday had 15. So if you want to average that out, the Ravens obviously averaged 5. Every other team averaged 0.52. It was 0.52 illegal formation penalties per team. It seems like the Ravens were made an example of. And obviously you can attribute some of it to, I'm sure teams watched on Thursday night and said, yeah, we're not going to do that. But I'll tell you this, there are plenty of screenshots out there, plenty of clips out there, plenty of proof out there of other teams, other players, other linemen that are lining up further back than Ronnie Stanley was that were not called for the same penalties that he was. Even in the Chiefs game, Juwan Taylor wasn't he wasn't innocent on every single play.
That rule was made up because of him.
He had plays where he was deeper than Ronnie Stanley. And I liked what John Harbaugh said.
What was even snapped?
Yeah. The lean. You're exactly right. And I like what John Harbaugh said, one, sticking up for Ronnie Stanley and the offensive line, but kind of what you had talked about earlier, where he said that, quote here, Ronnie lined up probably closer than he did in the preseason practices and all of those times, and they called it, and you mentioned the tracking data. You mentioned all the stuff that they have, and he thought that Ronnie Stanley was in a reasonable position. I just think, and Ronnie talked about it after the game, I do believe that the Ravens started this game on offense. They wanted to make a quick example of whatever team it was. And, I don't think they would. It's just, it feels unfair, and it's something that shouldn't and can't happen at this level of football, because if it's a point of emphasis, emphasize it for everybody, not just one team.
Well, that's the point. Listen, if you're going to do it for both sides of the football. The Kansas City Chiefs, if you made that rule up for them, then enforce it for them, not for the Ravens. If you are looking to have equity, make sure it's on both sides of the football.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that, to me, if you're enforcing it both ways, if you are making it, it's almost like in baseball, right, Q, in the strike zone for one team, it's getting called really tight and really on the corners, and, you're getting those calls, but then the other team isn't getting those calls, and, that balls 4 feet outside the plate are getting called. It's discrepancy. And that's what happened in this game. I'm not saying the Ravens didn't commit a single penalty. I'm not saying that, because they obviously did. But if you're going to call it one way, call it that way for both teams. Don't do one and the other type of jazz, because that is what we saw in this game. And ultimately, it disadvantaged the Ravens compared to any other NFL team. But coming up with the final part of the show, we're going to be talking more about the Ravens in that Kansas City game and how they can bounce back and move forward for their Week 2 game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Stay tuned. We got plenty to dive into on this episode of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I love going on FanDuel and seeing all of the things they have to offer. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon on a market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. For this Ravens and Raiders matchup in Week 2, the Ravens open up as 9.5-point favorites over on FanDuel. So if you want to get in on that action, head over to FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook. We return Locked On Ravens final segment. Kevin Oshek still rocking out here with Qadry Ismail. And Q, I want to talk about that last drive, because we saw the Ravens down 7, driving down the field. And I think that this is exactly what they had to do. The Chiefs were giving them to the stuff, kind of short passes. They're not going to get beat deep. They're not going to give up that deep ball. So what you do is you take the check downs, you take the short stuff, and you get out of bounds. And the Ravens are ripping off 10-yard gains, 12-yard gains in 5, 6, 7 seconds. Lamar methodically moving the ball down the field. So I thought that part was impressive. But then Lamar obviously missed a couple of throws when they had a chance to tie the game. The one to Isaiah Likely, where he was there, but obviously led him out of the end zone. And honestly, very fortunate for Isaiah Likely that he escaped that with what he did, because I thought he landed, and I saw him. I thought he landed on his collarbone and just snapped his collarbone. But luckily, it wasn't anything like that. Came back in the game, as we all know. Then there was that other play right after it, to where Lamar said that he was targeting Rashad Bateman, but seems like he caught Zay Flowers as his explanation of it and kind of soars it in the middle of both of them and hits nobody. And then the last play was a great throw, great catch, but just a shoe size too big there for Isaiah Likely. So let's just break down those final 3 plays based off what you remember and what you saw. Can you kind of take me through what your thought process was?
Yeah, I think when he was talking about the Zay Flowers one, he was saying that he was trying to hit Bateman. And the way the concept looked, it looked like Bateman's job was kind of taking out the middle defender while Zay was coming across on a deeper level platform throw. And what ultimately was the rush pushes Lamar up into the pocket, and it just didn't seem like he was able to either reset his feet because of the poor communication with the back, in this particular case, Justice Hill. And Justice Hill did an amazing job on Chris Jones. But again, it just now you're not settled and making, a really good throw, or at least giving yourself a chance for some vision to see. So that was where it was a culmination of things. The throw to Isaiah, really what to me felt frustrating is that, he said that he saw the defender and wanted to throw it the way he threw it, high like that. But when you layer different levels of throws and you're layering the ball and you're on your game, there are technically 2 other missed opportunities. One was for Zay when he was going down the right sideline. And my God, man, I mean, if he layers it up there, sets his feet and makes a throw, he kind of didn't really set his feet, just slung it. But if he sets his feet, now, boom, he just hits Zay in stride and it's a touchdown. Or when he had Bateman, and Bateman, it was zero coverage. Nobody was in the middle. He's running through the middle. However, whatever, but he didn't give his receiver a chance to make the throw or to make the catch. So again, that's 2 that were like, this is what the NFL is about. You take advantage of those zero coverage or man-to-man matchups. Your receivers need to feel confident that you can get them the ball. And that third one, back in the end zone, this is what an MVP does. He makes all 3 of those throws. He didn't make it. He climbed the ladder. Boom. You can see where Likely came down hard on his shoulder. But that's the tough part. That's where, again, for Lamar, there were some amazing plays, amazing awesomeness that he did. But then when you look at it, it's like, all right, you missed on those 3. How are we going to move forward and make sure that that doesn't happen again? If it is a situation where they can correct it and grow off of it, it's going to be scary. But in this particular case, as far as analysis-wise, yeah, that was a miss. I still think the protection was a little spotty. Again, we talk about Justice Hill, who did a good job. But now you're stepping up and you're like moving in a pocket. If you can just have some stability in that pocket and give an opportunity for Lamar to throw it sooner rather than later, man, you would have had Isaiah catching it and not necessarily having to catch, deflect, and clearly get his feet down in bounds, as opposed to it being a toe out of bounds.
Yeah, and I remember Lamar did talk about the Justice Hill factor when he was blocking Chris Jones in his answer, where he said that he saw justice on Chris Jones and kind of wanted to get the ball out faster. And that's where you talk about him not being able to reset his feet and kind of set, where Lamar was trying to get that ball out a little quicker. And maybe that contributed to it. John Harbaugh said there was miscommunication on that McCary was supposed to fan out onto Chris Jones and Hill wasn't supposed to have that responsibility. But to your point, I mean, out of what that play could have been with Justice Hill on Chris Jones, I think that was probably the best case scenario because he forced him into different lanes and didn't allow him to get close to Lamar on both those. The first one, he kind of got shoved out of the way. The second one on that would have been touchdown. Man, I mean, you got to give all the credit in the world to Justice Hill on that.
You really do. And look back at the game in the AFC Championship game where, he was highly criticized because of his pass blocking. Kudos to Justice. When Justice was called upon, Justice delivered both as a protector as well as running the ball and, well, I should say necessarily running the ball, but out of the backfield, he made some really good plays. But again, a lot more I think they can grow on in literally next week. They can grow. If they grow on that, like Las Vegas is not going to stand a chance. We obviously saw what J.K. Dobbins did against Las Vegas. It's not that I'm saying, hey, no, I am saying, excuse me. When we look at both what we have and what the Chargers have, like I like what we got. And I think that is a great opportunity to show some dominance from, yes, Derrick Henry and getting more than just 13 carries. Or unless those 13 carries are for 160 yards and hallelujah, knock yourself out.
Yeah, there we go. That's a good day. 13 for 160 or 460, whichever one you want to put out there. Hey. I'm with that 100%. But I think they have to reestablish their run, definitely. But I also think, what I'd like to see is also some more of those deep shots in establishing the vertical aspect of their offense. Lamar Jackson currently, again, we're recording this before Monday Night Football, but he's 6th in the league in passing yards, but more so towards the middle of the pack in terms of depth per target, average yards per completion, a lot of those. We saw him miss a couple of deep balls to Rashad Bateman and those as well. And we had kind of, you and I identified that before the season started, is Lamar was an okay deep ball passer early in his career, but that number over the past 2 was kind of fallen off a significant amount. So to me, what I'd love to see against this Raiders defense is for Lamar to hit a couple of deep shots and just kind of add that vertical element to this offense, because there are so many things that makes this offense dangerous. But if you can make teams be afraid of that vertical potential, it just frees up so much more for you as a whole.
It really does. And again, I mean, it's man to man on the outside. It's make no mistake about it. We're saying you can't complete those. You as a receiver, you salivate when you see Rashad Bateman matched up on the outside, when you see Zay Flowers matched up on the outside and you're going deep. I mean, that's every receiver's dream. It's easy touchdown. It's like, I'm getting the ball. Like, let's go. They quarterback and receiver need to hit those plays, period. Like, there's no, well, maybe. No. The quarterback and receiver, man-to-man coverage, when it's zero coverage or one safety in the middle, you got to make them pay.
Yeah, you absolutely do. So hopefully we see that. And then also a big thing from the defensive side of the ball on Thursday night, Q, was this, I guess it was a little controversy about Trenton Simpson versus Malik Harrison. Obviously, the Chiefs got whatever they wanted when they put Rashee Rice in the slot and were able to really just do their thing. I mean, it was on Roquan. It was on Malik Harrison. The one guy that was able to stop it, though, was Trenton Simpson, who I thought had a pretty solid game. Was not perfect, but I thought had a pretty solid game overall, especially in that will linebacker spot. Now, we know with Calvin, Noy, and that's something else that, we can talk about as well with his eye injury and kind of what that entails moving forward. But the Ravens are going to use Malik Harrison on the outside. That is a role that he is in. But, man, I just feel like you got to give Trenton Simpson a lot of those will snaps because he looked good when he was out there.
Yeah, Trenton Simpson looked poised, looked really like ready. Malik Harrison, playing out in space is not a good thing. Not at all. Oh, my God. I mean, okay, I feel good now. I got it out of my system, Just don't have him play out in space. He'll be okay. I think Trent Simpson, overall, I like what I saw. The dude was playing fast, and I love, obviously, makes a critical play. Although Patrick Mahomes, being Patrick Mahomes, as far as him catching it, dang it allowed for the play to continue to go on as opposed to the clock stopping and or if it was a turnover. When you look at just the overall defensive communication, you give up a touchdown, the worthy touchdown. It's, Marlon, I don't know what the call was, but I do know Marlon from a communication standpoint, like, your FBI, you got to recognize what's going on, what's the look, and don't get so eager to come up on, a back when you got two of your other guys, a linebacker your other safety kind of like, right down in the box. You got a speedster going behind you. You got Patrick Mahomes, doing his thing. Like, are you kidding me? So, come on.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's part of that is just, okay, we're in early season, right? You're kind of getting stuff, but there's no excuse for it. That's what I was about to say. There's no excuse for it, especially when Marlon's been in the league for as long as he has. He's passing off somebody, and especially a guy that just absolutely torched you earlier in the game. You would think that there'd be more attention over on that side, and that people, aka Marlon and others, would be more aware of that. So that can't happen. But who's not a veteran, Q, is Zach Orr. First ever game as defensive coordinator, first ever game as a play caller. What grade would you give him, all things considered?
Woo, first game and all that. And yeah, I mean, I thought the defense, obviously giving up 28 points. I would say this. It's a situation where I would give him, as a defensive caller and the adjustments that were made, a B. I think as a first time out, a B. As the Ravens and just the Raven way of doing things, and ultimately, say a C minus, because you did have the first couple of plays that were just hitting on all cylinders. Having Malik Harrison out there and just unfortunately not doing well in space. You did have the way in which they play coverage, and that coverage kind of bit them a little bit as far as Rashee Rice and getting behind guys and getting on linebackers. I would have loved to have seen them finish a little bit better around Patrick Mahomes. He is Patrick Mahomes, but you're supposed to be Odafe Owe. You're supposed to be David Ojabo. You're supposed to be athletic. You're supposed to be the one to get to him, not the other way around, him being elusive. So as a coordinator, that's all on him. And that's where, I guess it would be a C minus. You lose the game, unfortunately.
And I think, to me, again, there were definitely areas of growth that has to happen over the course of the next couple of weeks. And there were miscommunications. And you're right, that all falls on the coordinator. But I will say I'll give that defense credit, because that game could have easily gotten away from them, right? The Ravens have that strip sack, right? The Rosengarten play, and then the turnover on downs. Easily could have been a 21-7 game if the defense didn't hold up their end of the bargain. But you know what? 2 field goals for Zach Orr's defense keeps it at 13-7 and kept the Ravens within striking distance. So I thought that aspect was good. Certainly some flashes, but as you talked about, Q, a lot of areas to clean up as well. Last one for you. Harbaugh was holding up that 2. You saw him holding up that 2 to go for 2 after that Isaiah Likely play where that toe was out. Would you have done it? Would you have gone for 2 in the win, or would you have taken it to overtime?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is that it's the first game of the year. Sure, it's a game in a hostile environment. It's not going to really be to our advantage to go into overtime per se. Let's just strike while the iron's hot. They more likely would have just had some level of cover zero, all out blitz. Man, I'm putting all my best players in the game, and I'm like making sure everybody's like, ready to go and let's see it. So that's how I would have looked at it. I would have been like, yo, we going for 2. I can see it. He's done it before in other situations in the 17 years of it. So I think that's why.
Yeah, a few years ago, he was doing it every game. It seemed like the Ravens couldn't get any of them. But hey, you know what? If you put Derrick Henry in on that play, you run play action off of that potential, or you just try to bully ball it in with him, I think that, hey, you know what? They would have had as good of a shot as anybody to go and steal that one in Kansas City. But Q, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for hopping on, talking Ravens. Please, as always, tell people where they can find you, what you're working on.
Yeah, man, it's missiletraining.com, missiletraining.com for human and sports performance movement. And so it doesn't matter if you're age 6 all the way up to 85, which is my oldest client. Hallelujah. The gentleman is doing extremely well, competes in the senior Olympics as far as swim, Maryland. I love just the opportunity to help people get better. At the same time, you can also see me on Purple Pregame Show every Sunday on WJZ Channel 13. And you'll see us on Ryan Ripken's show. Check him out on all his social media platforms. But it's also Kevin Oestreicher and I here on the Lockdown. Boom, we're locking it down every week. Locked on Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and I, we love talking shop, love breaking down the games, love looking ahead, all those things. Check us out wherever your podcasts are.
Hey, you know where to find him. He laid it out right there. All the links to Q's work in the description down below. Q, appreciate you as always, and I appreciate everybody who tuned in today, watched, listened to the show. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe button on YouTube, follow along in audio form as well. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content. Stay tuned to see right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.